How often do your plans for the future and reality collide? Let's look at that this week. This is episode 9 of The Trust. Let's get this going. You're listening to The Trust, the podcast of the SDDC Unit Ministry team. I'm your host, Brad Cattleman, and we are glad you have joined us today. I hope this energizes you, edifies you, and may you experience God's blessings. I wonder for a moment if I were to go back and ask my teenage self, what do I want to be when I grow up? What would my teenage self say? You ever ask yourself that? I think mine would say something like astronaut, doctor, engineer, maybe jet pilot. Air Force pilot always seemed kind of cool, flying around and dropping bombs and shooting missiles. I was a kid when Top Gun was a thing, so flying jets was pretty stinking cool. Now, before I get a lot of critics out there, I realize that Top Gun's a Navy movie, but living on a ship, in a boat or the ocean, it's just not really my thing. Anyway, I never, ever would have considered becoming a chaplain. What would your teenage self say? I bet if we could talk to ourselves as teenagers, they'd be surprised at where we ended up. What a crazy, whirling journey life can be, right? There's an old Yiddish proverb that says, "Man plans, God laughs." We make plans for ourselves, but rarely do they turn out exactly as we had planned. Actually, rarely do they turn out at all like we had planned. I recently heard an interview that really speaks to this. Lewis Johnson is a sports correspondent for NBC. He was in Pyeongchang covering the Olympics in February, and in fact, he's covered every Olympics since 2000 in Sydney. Pretty neat, right? To be trackside when Usain Bolt crushed the world record, or when Chad Madster became the first American to medal in any sliding sport. But that's not where his career started. In 1988, he had aspirations to be an Olympic track athlete. He went to the Olympic trials, but he flopped. He was out in the first round. No luck. And then again in 1992, he found himself at the trials, but this time he got a lot closer. He got to the semifinals in the 800 meters, but he lost. He was crushed. He wanted to be an Olympian. Here he'd gotten so close, but his dream slipped away in less than 2 minutes. He would no longer be an Olympian track athlete. Lewis Johnson's dreams were crushed. His journey took a wild departure from what he had planned. Have you ever had your dreams crushed? Or your life journey take a wild departure from what you had planned? I have. I bet you have too. There's a great story in the Bible about the Israelites as they wander around the desert during the Exodus. The Israelites had thought they were going straight to Canaan. After they'd escaped Egypt, they walked across the Red Sea, they got the commandments, they headed up to the border with Egypt, but God led them into the wilderness for 40 years. Their journey took a wild departure. We can read the story now, and we know that the Israelites needed that departure. They weren't ready to go into Canaan at the time. However, imagine how it felt for them. They had this plan in mind, but quickly, their lives no longer resembled their plan. And 40 years later, they find themselves once again at the borders. And Moses tells them what God has said, and God gives them this assurance.
Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you.
Wow, what an assurance. The Israelites had been wandering through the desert in their own journeys, and none of their plans were working out as expected, and God was with them through the entire time. And God will be with them as they go on new adventures into this new land called Canaan. So how is that for us? How is that for you? When Lewis Johnson's dreams were crushed in 1992, he was not sure what was going to happen. But his failure to become an Olympian was exactly the turning point for him. Because of his experience as a track athlete, he got offered a job at the Sydney Olympic Games as a correspondent. And reflecting now, after 10 Olympics as a correspondent, he says this: "The journey was more than worth it. It led me to this idea to be a broadcaster." Was your journey worth it? I bet if you look back, you'd definitely say, well, this hasn't turned out as I expected it. But if you discern, if you think about it, you'd be able to say, God was there, and God was there. But more importantly, you're able to say, God will be there. None of our plans work out exactly as we expect them. But the journey is absolutely worth it. As God says in Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 6,
For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you.
This episode was recorded and produced by me, Chaplain Brad Cattleman. If you want to hear Lewis Johnson's full interview, it's on episode 6 of a podcast called The Podium. I encourage you to go check it out if you want to be inspired. Folks, I want to thank this week Captain Baldus, our very own G6. Thank you for listening and providing feedback. I always appreciate feedback from previous episodes, so keep it coming. In case you don't know him, Captain Baldus is our G6. Now, I can't explain exactly what he does, but I have an idea. And I'm pretty sure he and his awesome team, and they are awesome, they're the ones who, now, I may not have all the technical details right. Forgive me if I get a few of these wrong, but they're the ones who I think feed the little hamsters, which spin the wheels, which power the pumps that cause data to go from the internet to our inboxes through the pipes. At least I'm pretty sure that's how it works. So thanks, Captain Baldus. Thank you to all the folks at the G6 to keep our internets pumping through our big cables, because without you, none of this podcast would work. Of course, we always want to thank our voice of the Bible, the omnipresent, perhaps omniscient, John Arell. His voice is like the gentle, whispering breeze swishing through the aspen tree leaves on a Colorado mountain pass on a warm Sunday afternoon. Friends, we are trusted professionals, but trust in the Lord with all your heart, soul, and mind. This is The Trust. God bless you all.